Hi students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Students, in the previous session of Fibre to Fabric, we discussed about the importance of clothes and history of clothing. And in today's session, we will learn about the introduction, or we will discuss about the introduction to fibre and fabric. So let us start with this session. Yes students, you might have observed something similar when you try to thread a needle. What happens? Yes, many a time when we try to thread a needle, the end of the thread is separated into a few thin strands. And this makes it difficult to pass the thread through the eye of the needle. Right? So basically, what are these thin strands? What are they called as? Yes. The thin strands of thread that we see are made up of thinner strands called as fibers. And the second term is fabrics. Fabrics are made up of yarns, and yarns are further made up of fibers. So basically what we can say are the thin strands of thread are made up of thinner strands called fibers. They are very small, they are very thin. And what are fabrics? They are made up of yarns, and yarns are further made up of fibers. So they are interrelated to each other. Now students, I just want to share one story with you. Once me and my friend had been to the cloth market when we were very small children like you all, when we were in school. We had been to a cloth market, and what we saw there, we actually saw a large variety of cloth material in one of the shops, and we got confused. And the shopkeeper explained us that some cloths or fabrics were cotton and some were synthetic. He had woolen mufflers, shawls, saris, shirts, etc. So me and my friend felt very excited. We touched and felt these type of different fabrics. And finally we bought a woolen muffler and a cotton shirt. So basically, after our visit to the cloth shop, we began to notice various fabrics in our surroundings. We found that curtains, tablecloths, towels, bed sheets, blankets, dusters, all were made from different kinds of fabrics. Even our school bags and the gunny bags were made from some kind of fabric. We even noticed that. And then we tried to identify these fabrics as cotton, synthetic, or wool, or silk. So, you can also try this one out. You can also identify some fabrics. So, whenever you visit any cloth shop, you just start noticing, or you just start notice and try to observe that what are the different type of fabrics and what different type of materials can be made out of these, what different type of cloth can be made out of different fabrics. Right? So basically, the fibers are of various types. We can say that the long, thin threads like strands are called as fibers. Even the fibers present in our food are called dietary fibers. And these dietary fibers are made up of cellulose. So basically these dietary fibers play a very important role in our diet. They form an important component of our food. Even in animals, fibers are present in muscles and also as hair or fur. And these fibers, which are present in animals, are made up of long chains of proteins. So you can see the difference. Then the fibers which are present in our food are made up of cellulose, and the fibers which are present in the muscles of animals or as hair or fur are made up of long chains of proteins. So what I want to convey? Yes, the process of turning fibers into fabric is outlined in a very different way. Like fibers can be of three types, like dietary, natural and synthetic. But dietary fibers includes fruits, vegetables, nuts and grains. And do remember that these fibers are not those fibers which are used in making or weaving the cloths. No, these are dietary fibers. There is no use of dietary fibers in fabric formation or fabric industry. But natural fibers and synthetic fibers are the fibers which are used in making clothes. Natural fibers are further divided into two, means they can be obtained from plants as well as from animals. So once the fibers which are obtained from plants are cotton, jute, etc. The natural fibers which are obtained from animals like sheep, goat or rabbit, they make up yarn, and then from yarn it is made into fabric. Even the synthetic ones, that means the synthetic fibers, are made from the chemicals. For example, nylon, rayon, terylene, polyester, etc. Right? So from plants like cotton and jute, some fibers are made, means some yarn will be made, yarn or fiber, and then it is made into fabric and finally into cloths. Even from the animals and even from the synthetic fibers. So from plants, animals and from chemicals, yarn can be made, and from that fabric is produced or prepared in industries and factories. And finally it is weaved into the cloth. So this is the main process of turning fibers into fabric, in which there is no role of dietary fibers. So today there are many materials with which cloths are made. A person can choose from purchasing cloths made from natural origin materials like silk, wool, leather, but a person may also select one for the man-made fibers which are extensively used in cloths manufacturing like nylon, polyester, lycra, Gore-Tex. With the recent technological developments, there is a great speculation for the direction of future cloths. In fact, the clothing and electronics industry has just started. So what we can say basically, that cloths are made mostly from fibers. Fibers are like thin strands of thread that are woven to make fabrics. For example, cotton fabric, silk fabric, etc. So basically there are two main processes of making fabric from fiber, and they are weaving and knitting. So before going to that processes, first we will see that how these fibers to fabrics are made, or fibers to yarn is made? First, the fibers to yarn are made, and then yarn to fabric is prepared. So basically we can say from fibers we can prepare yarn, and from yarn we can prepare fabrics. So how are these fibers to yarn made? Yes, fibers are generally thin and short in length. And when a bunch of fiber is pressed and twisted, it can be converted into long, strong threads called as yarn. But this can't be done so easily. It needs some machine, or it needs some process. Yes, there is a process by which we can convert a bunch of fibers into long, strong threads called as yarn. So the process of twisting fibers to make yarn is called spinning. Spinning can be done by using hand spindle or simply a spindle called as chakra. Can you see this? This is called a chakra. And you can see here that lady, she is using this spindle, this chakra, and trying to spin the fibers to make it into yarn. So students, on a large scale, spinning is done by modern spinning machines which produce stronger yarn of uniform thickness. So from all these modern machines, yarn is made, and spinning is the basic one. Chakra or spindle is the basic one with which this process of spinning started. So that was about fibers to yarn. Now how can we prepare, or how can we get fabric from yarn? Let us study about it. Yes, there are many ways by which fabrics are made from yarns. The main two processes are weaving and knitting. So first we will study about weaving. Yes, a fabric is made up of two sets of yarns arranged together, and the process of arranging these two sets of yarns together to make a fabric is called weaving. Means we have to take two sets of yarns and then we have to arrange it together, and then we have to weave these two sets of yarns, and so this process is termed as weaving, because we are weaving two sets of yarns, and that is why this process is called weaving. So weaving is a process of making fabric from a yarn, or to prepare a fabric from a yarn. So basically I can say that the yarn produced from fibers can be converted into fabric by this method. So it is the process of making a fabric using two sets of yarn. And so we can say that weaving is done on devices called as looms. Small looms which can be operated manually, means by hand, are called as hand looms. Now listen it carefully. Weaving is a process for making fabric from yarn, and it is done on devices called as looms. Now this is a device known as loom, and these small looms, when they are operated manually, means by hand, they are called as hand looms. So the fabric which are made on hand looms is coarse and not very long. As we discussed that small looms are operated, which are called as hand looms. So obviously they are not very long, but the fabric made on these hand looms are very coarse. And on a large scale, fabric is made on power looms in mills. So always remember that the looms which are small and manually operated are called hand looms, and the looms which are prepared on a very large scale, they are called as power looms, and power looms are generally used in mills, in large mills. So the fabric produced here by hand looms and power looms can be several meters long. Not by hand looms, but the power looms. The fabric produced by power looms can be several meters long. And that is why if you visit any shop, which is a wholesale one, if you visit any wholesale market, you can see there are many fabrics which are several meters long. So basically, what can we say about weaving? Yes, weaving involves making fabric by arranging two sets of yarn, and it is done by using machines called looms, which can be hand operated or power operated. And the pattern in which two sets of threads are arranged in a piece of woven cloth is called a weave, and this process is called weaving. So I hope you are clear about this process. Let us now move on to other process. Yes, knitting. So students, knitting is also one of the way by which fabrics are prepared from yarns. The main process, one we discussed about weaving, and the other one is knitting. Now what happens in this process? Yes, in knitting, a single yarn is used to make a piece of fabric. A single yarn gets pulled out continuously as the fabric gets unraveled, means as the fabric gets separated. So have you noticed how sweaters are knitted? How your grandmother knits the sweater is very old process. Even my grandmother used to knit sweater. So basically, what do? Yes, they take a single yarn which is used to make a piece of fabric, and the single yarn, they pull out the single yarn continuously. Can you see here in this picture? They pull out the single yarn continuously to make a sweater. And why do they pull out continuously? So that they can make a fabric which gets unraveled, means it should not be separated. Then and then only they can make out something out of it. Have you ever pulled the yarn from a torn pair of socks? Have you ever? What happens when you pull the yarn from a torn pair of socks? Yes, a single yarn gets pulled out. Same way. When our grandmother continuously pulls out the single yarn to make a fabric, right? So always remember that a single yarn is used to make a piece of fabric, and it gets pulled out continuously when it gets separated. So if we are not separating it, then we can make something. For example, socks and many other clothing items are made of knitted fabrics. So what we can say, that knitting is done by hand and also on machines. It is the process of making a fabric using only one yarn, and a complete sweater can be made from just one long yarn. For example, mufflers, vests, t-shirts and other clothing materials can be made out of knitting or by knitting the cloths. So basically knitting is done by hands on long knitted needles, or it can also be done by machines. Knitted fabric is comparatively thicker. So we can outline this process as: first there are protein chains from which fiber is made, and then yarn is prepared, and from yarn this fabric is prepared, and finally the cloth is prepared, which is also called as the finished product. So the finished product which you see in the market goes through all these processes. It is not so easy, right? So this process is actually very tedious. So basically what we can say about knitting? Yes, knitting involves making fabric by forming a series of connected loops of yarn by using knitting needles or machines. For example, what we discussed was sweaters. Sweaters are made from wool strands by knitting. So basically, weaving and knitting are used for making different kinds of fabric. And these fabrics are used for a variety of clothing items, for example, a frock, a dress, a denim, etc. Right? The fabric is stitched into cloths. Like a cotton fabric can be stitched into a cotton frock or cotton kurta. And you can try to touch and feel the fabrics of a bed sheet or a towel or a gunny bag or a blanket. Are they all the same? No, they are not the same, because different fabrics are suited for different purposes and they are made out of different fibers. So basically my question is that where do these fibers or fabrics come from? The fibers of some fabrics such as cotton, jute, silk and wool are obtained from plants and animals. And based on this, based on the things like obtaining from plants and animals, they are divided into different categories. So we will learn about these categories, which are based on how they are obtained either from plants or animals. We will discuss about it in the next session. So children, students, I hope you enjoyed this session of just an introduction to fiber and fabric. We will learn more about fiber and fabric and their categories in the next session. Till then, keep learning, keep enjoying. Bye.